Hello. Thank you for tuning in to another episode on ACB Photography. My name is April, and today I'm going to be going through a process from a raw portrait all the way to the finished product. As you all know, if you're following me on Instagram or Facebook, I am a portrait photographer. That's what I specialize in, but I love all photography. So I just wanted to show you guys how I do my process as far as the workflow in the after production. So stay tuned with me as I walk you through a portrait processing. Okay, let's get started on our raw image processing. Just as a note before we start, I shoot all my images in RAW format instead of JPEG. And the reason why is the raw image format, even though the image size is a lot larger than a JPEG, it also stores more information about your photo as far as the exposure, the contrast, the highlights, shadows, whites, blacks. It stores all of that information to where you can easily edit it. In a JPEG format, you do not have the control over the editing process like you do in RAW. So I just wanted to drop that little nugget right there first. So this is a picture that I took of my daughter. We did this live on Instagram a couple of weeks ago, just, impromptu photo shoot. And I just wanted to share one of the images that we took from that session, as well as all the edits in the session. If you're not following me on Instagram and Facebook, I encourage you to go over there. The handles are the same, ACB Photography LLC. Okay, so let's get into it. The picture on the left side is before, and the picture on the right side is after. So I haven't done anything to the image just yet. The image looks pretty good straight out of camera because I do shoot in Capture One. And what Capture One gives you the ability to do is snap your first image and go ahead and adjust your highlights and shadows. And then every image you shoot after that is going to be pretty much adjusted to your first image. So that's why we don't have to do any major adjustments here, but I'm going to go through the process just to show you what I do. So for me, I'm going to start with the highlights in the image. The highlights are the brightest parts of the image. I'm going to decrease those just a little bit because it's going to give you more detail back into the image by decreasing the highlights. So that's where I start. Start there, and I'm going to just decrease just a little bit. I'm going to zoom in so we can see just a little bit. Okay, and then the shadows. I always bump up on my portrait photos. I always bump up the shadows just a little bit because what that does is it lightens the darker areas of your image. So with the shadows, I like to get great detail in the hair of my clients. So I always bump up the shadows to the point where I can see that detail really increase. So I'm going to bump up those shadows a little bit, so you can see what it's doing to the image there. We've got lots of details in the hair in the image. But with that, when you bump up the shadows, you also decrease the brightness of the blacks in your image. Just as like with the highlights, when you decrease your highlights, you lose some of the whiteness. If you can see in her necklace, it kind of looks a little gray, but we're going to add that back in. So we're going to bump up the whites just to restore some of that brightness that we lost. That looks good. And then we're going to decrease the blacks. I'm going to zoom back out so that you can see how we lost some of the black detail in the drape. So we're going to decrease the blacks to get that back, and that will also decrease the blackness in her hair, will increase the black in her hair back to where it was. And I think that looks really good. So the next thing I do is the contrast. Every image does not need anything added to the contrast or taken away, but I just like to play with it just a little bit. I'm going to bump it up just a couple of notches. I think that looks good. All right, I'm not going to mess with the exposure because I pretty much exposed it correctly in camera during the shoot. So the next thing I'm going to go down here and add a little bit of vibrance, just a tad. And I'm not going to touch the saturation because I feel like the image is good as far as saturation. Okay. Now for me on my portraits, I love for my portraits to just really pop as far as the clarity, as far as the sharpness. I really like that standout look. So I always go down here and increase the clarity just by 1 or 2 stops. Take it away and you can see the difference when I increase the clarity. You see from the before here and the after how much clearer and crisp that is. So that's something that I always do, especially on my portraits. And then the last step for me on this photo, I'm going to just increase the sharpness as well by a little bit. Not too much. So you can see the difference in those two images. All right, so now we're ready to head over to Photoshop to finish, and all we need to do is click open and it's going to go right to Photoshop. All right, so here is the image. The raw portion has been processed, and now we need to complete the processing on the rest of the image. So the first thing I do, and I'm going to say it in every tutorial, is make a copy of your background layer. On Mac, you hit Command J. On PC, you hit Control J. That's going to copy that layer for you. The reason I do that is because I do not want to make any changes to the image that I cannot get back the original image. So with that background layer being copied and the background being locked, we'll always have our starting image to work with. All right, my next step on my processing is to look at the background. Well, let me back up. My next step is to crop the image the way I want it. And for me, I'm going to crop this image to a ratio of 4:5. And a lot of my portraits, I do crop to the 4:5 ratio because it is the ideal size to post on social media, especially Instagram, Facebook. I always, if I post an image, it's going to be 9 times out of 10 cropped to 4:5. That way it fills the whole screen for the person who's scrolling through Instagram and your image just stands out. So some of her other images I crop to a 1:1 ratio, the standard kind of headshot type ratio. But for this one will be posted on Instagram, so I'm going to crop it to the 4:5 ratio. So we go over here to the side and grab our crop tool. We click that, and then automatically this box is going to come up. So in order to activate the tool so that we can crop it, we need to click inside of the box. Once you do, you see the grid lines come up. Now you're ready to crop. The last image that I had, it was cropped to the landscape ratio. I'm going to change this back to portrait just by adjusting the slider. And then I'm going to adjust the slider where I would like to crop this image off at. And just remember, when you're cropping, you want to remember your rules of composition. You want to remember the rule of thirds. You want your subject to be centered or either on one of these points, these cross points in the rule of thirds. Also, you want to be aware of your negative space. You don't want too much space around your image because you do not want to draw away from your subject. You want the focus, you want the viewer's eyes to go directly to the subject of your image. So for me, I wanted to crop it right below her shoulder. And For me, I'm going to crop it right there. Well, I'm going to move it over just a little bit because I want to get the back of her hair. That looks good, and you go up here and click OK. All right, I'm going to use Command 0 to resize the image. All right, so we have cropped our image. My next step is to look at the background and see, is there anything in the background? Does the background look okay? Does anything need to be cleaned up in the background? And as you can see, I've got some marks on this backdrop paper right here and over here. I'm going to use my method. I already have a video. I'll pin it up here at the top for you on how to clean up those backgrounds. I'm going to go through that process right quick and clean up this background. Feel free to refer back to that video if you need in depth, but I'm just going to run through this. I'm going to select my subject. I'm going to go up here and select modify and then expand those pixels by 3. Then I'm going to once again select modify and feather those pixels by 1. I'm going to make a copy of this selection of the subject, Command J, and then I am going to go down to layer 1 and invert that selection so that we've got the background selected instead of the subject. So select an inverse, and I'm going to make a copy of it. So in layer 3 is our background. I am going to go up here and add some blur to, I'm going to add some blur to the background to get rid of those imperfections. So we're going to hit filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and it was previously set at 100 for one of the other photos I did, and I think it looks pretty good, so I think I'm going to leave it right there at 100. Okay, got our background cleaned up. That was quick and easy. So I'm going to merge these layers right here. I'm going to highlight all 3 of those layers and hit Command E to merge them into one. Then I'm going to rename this layer retouching because that's the next step in my process. So in the retouching layer, I'm going to clean up any blemishes or imperfections in the skin. And her skin is perfect already. Just going to enhance the perfectness by cleaning up those little small blemishes that may be there. So I do this using several different tools. Over here on the side, I'm going to go over here to the remove tool. Inside of this tool right here with the band-aid, there are several different tools that I use. I use the spot healing brush, the remove tool, or the healing brush, and sometimes the patch tool as well. But for this tutorial, I'm going to use the remove tool. So you just zoom in. I suggest that you zoom in really close so that you can see what you're doing, and just go in here and just pretty much just wipe away those imperfections. I'm going to speed up the video right here, and you can watch as I get rid of all the imperfections. Okay, we pretty much have all of the imperfections taken care of. There's one thing that I do not do when I'm editing is anything that is part of the client's skin, or a part of the client, like freckles or birthmarks and things like that. I do not edit that out unless they have specifically asked that I do so. I just don't believe in changing someone's appearance. I want their photos to reflect them as they naturally are. And for my daughter, she does have a birthmark, and it's a little bit seen in this right here. That's her birthmark. I'm not going to edit that, and I wouldn't do it to any other clients as well, unless they specifically asked me to do so. All right, so I think we've got it pretty much good. So my next step in the editing process is to go in and do the skin smoothing. After I've got the retouching done, all the blemishes taken care of, my next step is to do the frequency separation process and smooth out the skin just to give it a polished look. Now, I do have a separate video already posted on frequency separation. Feel free to go back and look at that if you need it more in depth. But for this tutorial, I've already have an action set for that. And I'm going to go ahead and just do my action to save some steps. So I'm going to my action. I'm going to press play. And it's already going to do all those layers for me. Click in there, and just remember from the previous video on frequency separation, in the high layer are the textures of the image, and in the low layer are the colors. So frequency separation basically is separating your image into two separate frequencies, into the textures and into the colors, because we're going to start off with smoothing the colors and giving it a polished look, and then we're going to go back to the textures and do any other blemish touch-up that we may have missed in the retouching process. So for that, I'm going to disable the high layer or the textures, and I'm going to click inside the low layer because we're going to work with the colors. So we're going to go over here and grab our mixer brush tool. So just right click your brush tool on the side and go down to mixer brush. All right, and be sure that you have a soft round brush selected. If you do not, it's not going to look as well. All right, and another important thing to do up here is to clean your brush to start off with. If you've been brushing with another color on the regular brush, you want to make sure that it's totally clean before you start. And then we want to make sure that this box is selected right here. It says clean brush after each stroke. So we want to make sure that that box is checked and it's highlighted, so that each stroke that you do, the brush is going to clean itself so that you can do the next stroke. Okay, so my settings here, I have the wet set at 8%, the load at 75%, the mix at 90%, and the flow at 100%. This mix is off right here. It's airbrush feature. We don't need that. And this feature right here is on 11, the smoothing, the stroke smoothing. I have it set on 11. You can start with these settings and just tweak it as you need it. So essentially what we're going to do is go through here and paint over the skin and just mix and blend the colors that are alike in the image. So with each area that you do, each color, you're going to have to increase and decrease your brush size in order to get those colors. So I'm going to go ahead and get started so you can see how that's going to look. So right here, basically we're just taking our brush and just smoothing out those colors. Now with the textures layer disabled, it's gonna look like the picture is turning cartoonish or plastic or whatever. Don't worry about that, because I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna do a few strokes on her forehead first, and once I finish that, I'm gonna turn the textures layer back on so that you can see how it's looking. And when you're editing, you can just do a little bit, turn the layer back on so that you can see what you're doing and how it's progressing. But just remember those light colors, blend those together so that we can it can run smoothly into the next color. Lift up your mouse or your pen, whatever you're using to edit it, after each stroke to blend those colors. Okay, looks like we've blended her forehead pretty well. I'm going to turn on the high layer to see how we're looking. You see that? It looks very good. Just gives her skin that even more polished and popped look. So I'm going to continue. I'm going to fast forward through this so that I can continue retouching all of her skin, and then we'll be back. Okay, I have finished the color retouching on the frequency separation portion. As you can see, I'm going to zoom in really, really close. You see how we did not lose any texture in her skin. We've blended the colors very beautifully. Didn't need much work anyway, but we just gave her a little pop to what she already has. I'm going to turn off the frequency separation layer for just a second so you can see how it looked before. There's the before and there's the after. So we just evened out her skin tone and smoothed those colors and kept the definition of her skin. So the next portion, we're going to go up to the high layer and we're going to grab the clone stamp tool and we're going to go in and just make sure that we got all the little imperfections out. If you find any, we're going to clone stamp those out. So just like the brush tool from the colors layer, we're going to make sure that we have a soft round brush selected. And we're just going to go through, and I think it looks pretty good, really, really good as is. But we're just going to go through and get any imperfections out and just smooth that out. So with the clone stamp tool, if you're not familiar with the clone stamp tool, you are essentially grabbing an area of the image and stamping it over top of another area. So what you're going to do is, let me see, right here, we've got, well, this color right here. Let me try to find a good source point for you. Let's use this little area right here. We want to cover this area with an area that looks like it. So we're going to go, and I'm on Mac, so I'm going to hit Option. And it's Alt on PC. So you're going to hit Alt or Option, and we're going to stamp that area, and then we're going to go over here and redo that with the area that we stamped. Hope that makes sense to you guys. So I'm just going to go through here and clone stamp any little things that I see, but I think we look good. All right, so the next step of the frequency separation is we're going to go back to the low layer or the colors layer, and we're going to grab our lasso tool, and we're going to add one more step into the smoothing of the skin. We're going to highlight mainly the large portions of the skin, like the forehead, the cheek, the chin, and any other skin that we see. Make sure that at the top that you have it feathered by about 5 pixels. So I'm going to highlight her forehead, and I'm going to add just a little more blur to it. I'm going to go up here to Filter, Blur, then Gaussian Blur. Now this is going to be at your discretion. You know, that's too much. That is the setting that we had for the background. That's way too much. So we're just going to increase it as it looks good to you. For me, I like that around 8.5 pixels, and hit OK. As you can see, it just added that extra smoothness. So I'm gonna go through here and I'm gonna do like under the eye and the cheekbone area. Now when we do this, sometimes it takes away from that shine and those highlights that we get from the flash, but we're going to add that back in the next step, so don't worry. Gaussian blur, well, actually 9.3 pixels, that looks good. I'm going to do up under this eye, and that just gives the skin that creamy texture, that smooth creamy texture. Gaussian blur. Let's do her cheek, her chin. You can right click and hit Gaussian blur. Looks good. Let's do the neck. Smooth that out even more. Right click, Gaussian blur is your shortcut. And then I'm not going to do this whole area in one chunk. I'm going to section it off and do chunk by chunk, because I don't want to flatten the image. It just gives it that pop, that glow. All right, we are done with our frequency separation. We didn't lose too much detail in the highlights, but I'm just going to go through the next step and just enhance those highlights and those shadows in a process that's called dodge and burn. I'm going to do a separate video just for dodge and burn later on, but I'm just going to quickly go through it for this image. So my last step that I do is the dodge and burn. Essentially, you're highlighting and you're contouring, just like in makeup. You're highlighting the forehead, the nose, the cheekbones, any part of the image that the light has hit, like her shoulder, will highlight that. And so the first step, I'm going to add a curves adjustment layer. And I'm going to go ahead and add two, because we're going to add one for the highlights and one for the shadows, or one for the dodge and one for the burn. So the top layer, I'm going to go ahead and just rename these layers dodge. The bottom layer is going to be burn. And I'm going to go ahead and group these into its own group. So I'm going to highlight dodge. I'm going to hit Command or Control, highlight burn, and then I'm going to hit Command or Control G to group those. And I'm going to rename this dodge and burn. All right, I'm going to open that back up to expose my layers. So we're going to work on the dodge first. We're going to click right here into this layer on the outside there. And as you see, this little chart pulls up right here. We're going to curve this line upward so that we can brighten the image. So we're going to grab a point right here in the middle and we're going to bring it up. All right, you see how bright that image just got? That's going to be our highlights. So instead of brightening the whole image, we're going to click on this mask right here, and we're going to invert the mask, meaning we're going to take away the dodge from the image so that we can go back and paint it on where we want it to instead of on the whole image. To invert, we're going to click inside the mask and hit Command or Control I, and it's going to turn black. Black means it's off. White means it's on. So we're going to go down to our burn layer. We're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it in opposite. Where we tilted the curve up for the dodge, we're going to tilt it down for the burn to darken the image. Just a little bit. All right, and then we're going to go back and click inside the mask, and we're going to invert that mask to take it away. All right, let's work on our dodge first. So we're going to add more shine, more pop to those areas that are shiny from the flash and the areas that we want to highlight and contour. So we're going to grab our brush tool. We're going to right click this mixer brush and grab the regular brush tool. And it's important that when you're adding a mask on, that you paint with white. Painting with white adds, painting with black subtracts. So make sure that white is selected, which it is, and we're going to also grab a soft round brush. Make sure we're on the soft round. And the opacity, we're going to put it all the way down to 10 because we don't want to put too much on it. We're just adding a subtle shininess to those highlights. So adjust your brush size accordingly and just paint back on the highlights. As you can see here, we're painting on that highlight on her forehead. And I'm going to paint on right up under the eyes. We're going to lighten that. We're going to paint right here down the middle of the nose and highlight that. And this light that the flash caught on the side of her nose, we're going to paint over that to make that pop. All the areas essentially that the light is hitting, we're going to highlight that. I also like to go over the lips. As you can see how the light, the flash hit her lips, and we're going to just enhance that pop as well. So dodge and burn, we're just enhancing the image. Not adding to, not taking away, we're just enhancing. Okay, I'm going to get all this done. Cheekbones, like right here, that contour. I'm going to highlight that part. Right here on her chin, I'm going to highlight that. Then we're going to go down to right here in her collarbone. I'm going to highlight that. Highlight the flash that's hitting the back of her shoulder. And of course, highlight this shoulder. Okay. Don't worry if this looks a little weird. We're not done yet. All right, now we're going to add the contour or the shadows. Same process. Make sure you're painting with white to add it on. And we're just going to take those darker areas and just kind of enhance just a little. It's just like makeup. I think they're good right there. So as you can see, some of the highlights and some of the dodge and burn is kind of harsh. So what we're going to do is go up. Let's start with the dodge. We're going to click inside the mask, and you see the density and the feather options come up. We're going to feather so that it spreads out those highlights to an even tone. So just feather until you see them start to disappear and spread a little bit. Like about right there. We're going to do the same for the burn. Click in there and let's feather that out. Alright, let's do a quick check on before and after. That's before the dodge and burn. And that's the after. Just gives her that extra pop. I'm going to feather that dodge out just a little bit more. Yep. And there we go. That is our final image. What I like to do when I finish editing an image, I like to go and put all of my edits into one group so that I can turn it all on and off to see the true before and after. So I'm going to start with the dodge and burn, which is the last thing I did, go all the way down to retouching, and I'm going to put those in a group. And I'm going to rename that group All Edits. Alright, and then from here I can turn it off and on so I can see the before and after. So this is the after. There's the before. There's the before. And there's the after. All right, that was so fun. Like I just really enjoy teaching. I enjoy sharing my knowledge with other people. I have a great passion for photography. I have since a small child, and I just love it. I love everything about it. So if you like this video, if this video helped you, go ahead and give me a like, leave me a comment, let me know what you thought about it. If you have anything else that you would like to see in the future, go ahead and comment that as well. Also, if you know a photographer, new photographer, or intermediate photographer that is struggling in a certain area and you think that this video could help them, go ahead and share that with them too. I would love for more people to see the video, my content to be pushed out, so I can keep creating these videos for you guys. Stay on the lookout. I will be filming a full process video on an actual photo shoot. Probably going to be a headshot, since that's my specialty. I'm going to film a whole headshot special from start to finish. So you're going to go with me from the process of doing the actual photo shoot to the editing all the way through. So be on the lookout for that. Also, if you're not already subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Make sure you're following me on all social media, ACB Photography LLC. My name was April. Once again, thank you. Bye.